So today I'm going to be talking about the power of education and specifically the power of educating girls and women in the developing world. And so this all is not something new to me, but it kind of became more in the forefront when a book came down several years ago called Drawdown. Raise your hand if you've read Drawdown or if you know about Drawdown, if you're familiar with it. Good, good. Many of you are. Well, Drawdown is a book edited by Paul Hawkins, and he comes up with 100 ways to curb climate change, to draw it down, if you will. And the book consists of 80 current opportunities to draw down, and then he has 20 kind of upcoming ways to do it. And so this book came out, and it was really, I think, really a great thing because it gave people this long list of ways. If you look here, this shows you some of the ways that people can draw down climate change. And if you look, this is the rank. Number one, refrigerant management. And the second one is reduce food waste. Plant-rich diet is 4, and so you'll see this long list of things there. And some of these things are familiar to us. I mean, if you look at number 8, solar farms. Number 10, that's something that really has had a lot of attention in recent years, rooftop solar. So, encouraging folks like you and me to get solar panels at our house. But then there's, some not so familiar ones. Like if you look at number 9, silvopasture. If you look at number 15, afforestation. Those are things that we may not be familiar with. Number 16 is conservation agriculture. And those, we know those words, but we may not know exactly what they refer to. But if you look at number 6, 5, and 6, well, let me go back. So this slide here just shows more. So 19, managed grazing. Number 20 is nuclear. And on this graph that they provide, you'll see here in this column here, you'll see the solution that I've been talking about. Then they divide it into sectors. And then the total atmospheric CO2 reduction. And I think, if I remember correctly, this is over a 10-year period. And then the net cost, so this is what it would cost to make these changes. And then the net savings is in the last category. So if you look, refrigerant management goes under materials. It has the possibility of cutting 89 gigaton, because that column is in gigatons, 89 gigatons of atmospheric CO2. The cost is nothing, just trying to manage it better. And then the saving is negative 902 billion US dollars. So there's a savings there. And I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds with drawdown because some of these, you see a negative number, you see a positive number. There's a cost, but then the savings. And so you kind of have to say, okay, we're going to deduct the cost from the savings and that sort of thing. But we're not going to get into there. We can talk more about drawdown. Sustainable Sanctuary has had a program on drawdown before, and we can always do a refresher course if we need to do that if you're interested. But anyway, if you look, this is kind of getting farther down on the list, number 32. Remember, this is out of 80 current ones and then 20 more. 81 through 100 is kind of exploratory type things. So ships, transportation. So anyway, but if you look at that list, if you add number 6 and number 7 together, educating girls and family planning, it actually becomes the number 1 solution. So let me go back to that. So you'll see number 6 here, educating girls, you get 51 gigatons of CO2. And then if you look at family planning, number 7, you get 51 gigatons. And they're both exactly the same, 51.48, 51.48. And you may say, well, how is that? Wow, that's odd that they're exactly the same. Well, the truth is, Drawdown, when they put all this together, and Drawdown was done not just by the editor, but he had scientists and experts from all over the world who was covering this thing. So they were experts in their area. So these two areas, number 6 and 7, were originally one category. So it was just one thing: educating women and girls and family planning. But they felt like it was important enough that they were related but not completely the same. So they decided to divide them into two categories. But they said they're so interrelated, they just literally split it straight down the middle. So originally these two things were combined, but then for the book they split them into two categories: educating girls and family planning. So anyway, so there we go. So that's where the kind of the motivation to talk about this. Back to, you see, it becomes the number one solution. And so the question that you may ask and I ask is, why educating girls and women? Why does that have such a huge impact? And why is it important? Well, so here's just some of the background information on what plays into making it important. So one is women make up more than 2/3 of the world's 796 million illiterate people. So that's a significant thing for us to be aware of, that women are predominantly not educated in different parts of the world. And then you see in this, from 2019, in sub-Saharan Africa, 52 million girls do not attend school at all. And then according to global statistics, just 39% of rural girls attend secondary school, and this is far fewer than rural boys, and that's a 45% of rural boys attend school. And then if you look urban girls, it's a little closer. For girls living in cities, 59% attend school, but for urban boys who attend school, it's 60%. So still, even in the cities, girls have less opportunity to go to school. So here's another statistic here. So every additional year of primary school, and this kind of gets into the reason why it helps curb climate change. It kind of moving. There's not a direct cause, but indirectly we're moving closer to why it makes a difference. So every additional year of primary school increases girls' eventual wages by 10 to 20%. And we may have to say, well, that seems like that's counterintuitive, because if they make more money, then they'll buy more stuff and it will cost more. But you'll see kind of why this education part is really important. So then educating girls, it also encourages girls to marry later and have fewer children, and leaves them less vulnerable to violence. And so right there, you might be able to start imagining why this might make a difference, because they're marrying later in life, so they're having fewer kids, and so that definitely is a major way to curb climate change. Fewer people, using resources on the planet. And I'll pause here for a moment, because this is not a presentation about limiting population, or saying China for years had a one-child policy, and I know there's lots of concerns about contraception in the world and that sort of thing, but this is not about that, because in some ways, for those of us living in America, it makes sense that we, smaller population, should solve our problems. But there's a lot of controversy in that, because that's kind of a privileged perspective, because we have access to healthcare and birth control and all that sort of thing. And other faiths, Catholic Church, contraception is something that they do not advocate for, at least officially, from the papal standpoint. And the truth of the matter is that population has not gotten us to the place where we are now, with a planet that is warming, where we're concerned about our existence. The truth of the matter is that, people having, 5, 6, 7, 10 kids in Africa, they have not contributed to global warming. It's really those of us living in America, in Australia, in Europe, in the Western developed world. It's our consumption habits that have, contributed to where we are now. But there are concerns that as populations become more middle class in China and other places in the world, and as they continue to want to live a more comfortable lives that the world can't keep up. And if you're interested, there's a website you can go to where you can type in various things about yourself. You can type in why I drive a Humvee, and I live in an igloo, and all these different things. And from there, it'll calculate how many worlds we would need if everybody in the world lived like us. So it really tells you what your carbon footprint, but it tells you how many worlds we need. And so anyway, so that's kind of where the concern for population comes now, is if everybody lives, like we do here in Kansas City, then we know that we have a problem. But population control is not what we're talking about. But I think those are important issues that we need to acknowledge at least. So back to my reasons here. If you look at this one right here, rural women's deficits in education have long-term implications for family well-being and poverty reduction. So it goes back to, if a woman is better educated around the world, then their family is healthier and they have less poverty. I mean, and I think that makes sense to us. We know that here in America, we really tout education. Hey, get an education and you can, doesn't matter where you grew up, you could grow up in poverty, but if you can get an education, then, you can change your life. And I think that's true, and the statistics show that's true. And here's the last one, which may seem a little counterintuitive, but educating girls lowers the mortality rates of children less than 5 years old. And that goes back to that one above it. Women who are educated know how to better take care of their kids. If a kid is sick, they know that, okay, I mean, they need antibiotics, and they learn more about, proper medicine. There are, holistic, natural medicines that we could benefit from the Western world, but kind of this idea of Western medicine has really helped us to be healthier people. And so this will allow them to know, hey, I need to take my kid to the doctor, as opposed to take it to the oldest lady in town who's been kind of, been helping kids all their lives. And so, not to say that lady doesn't have knowledge and importance, but it just helps the mothers better know how to direct what kind of care they need to get their kids. And then also, with less poverty, then, those kids eat healthier, they have better nutrition, they get their vaccinations, all those sorts of things too, because there's the financial ability to provide those things. So those are just a few of the things that educating women do for people around the world. And so there's this quote that I think is really powerful. It kind of sums up everything that I just talked about. And this African proverb says, if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And while this is a proverb, the UN several years ago did a study on this. It's called Half the Sky was the name of their study, and there's a documentary on it now. But basically it says women hold up half the sky, and it kind of builds on this idea that if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And the idea that if you educate a man, the man will have a better job and that sort of thing. But statistics have shown it doesn't affect the family as much. But if you educate a woman, that woman is going to take her knowledge home. If she learns how to read, then her kids are more likely to learn how to read at a younger age. She's going to see how the benefit of education is for boys and girls in her home. And so she's going to advocate for them to go to school, since often in many places in the world, kind of women kind of are the ones in charge of the homes. And I don't want to, advocate for that stereotype, because I think, there's a lot of men who are doing so here in America, but I think worldwide, often women are the ones caring for children. And so when you educate those children, and then that cycle continues, those kids grow up, and then the girls go to school, and then they have kids, and they educate their girls, and their boys too, and it just grows exponentially, because each generation has more and more education opportunity. So you do educate many people by educating one woman. And here's a quote from Drawdown. And this kind of gets more specific to why they think that educating girls is important. So education lays a foundation for vibrant lives for girls and women, their families, and their communities. It also is one of the most powerful levers available for avoiding emissions by curbing population growth. Women with more years of education have fewer and healthier children and actively manage their reproductive health. And so, I mean, that kind of shows that they had population in mind, but I don't want to get into like specifically about population today. I want to focus on this education. So here's something else they said in Drawdown. When family planning focuses on healthcare provisions and meeting women's expressed needs, empowerment, equality, and well-being are the results. The benefits to the planet are side effects. So this kind of gets to what I was just saying, that these women having better lives improves their lives. So we could do this. I could do this presentation today. And you'll learn here in a minute that I have been doing this presentation for years. Just in itself, educating women is something that I think, as people of faith, I think it's something we should be concerned about. It's something we should be putting efforts into as congregations, as individuals, and especially as an affluent nation. All right, so, and then here's another quote from Drawdown. Universal education in low and lower middle income countries could result in a 51.48 gigaton emission reduction by 2050. But remember, that was just half of it. That was the education point. The family planning, which goes hand in hand. You educate a girl, they do better family planning. So really, if you educate a girl, you're getting twofold. So it's really 102, almost 103 gigatons reduction by the year 2050. And so right there, I mean, I guess I could pause for a moment, or we could, well, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat or just jot it down. And then when we get to the end of the presentation, we can have a discussion. So I'll just continue to press forward here. And so that leads us, I hope that this has, for as brief as it's been, it's made sense to you about what Drawdown and what I'm, trying to present here. But now I want to share with you opportunity to kind of, so what kind of thing. So what can you do about it? Yeah, I'd love to educate girls, but, I'm not a teacher, and I don't live in, other parts of the world. So what can I do? Well, there's a program that Sustainable Sanctuary is partnering with called One Life. And One Life is an education program that is about educating girls. And the motto of One Life was changing the world one life at a time. But really, the truth is, we can mark that out in kind of connections to this kind of presentation on environmentalism. And we could say one life saving the world one life at a time, because we know that from what I just shared, educating a girl cuts carbon from the atmosphere, and that affects us, because carbon emitted in China is affecting our climate here, and carbon emitted here is affecting elsewhere. So, we only have one planet, so we are saving the world one life at a time when we educate a girl. So One Life was founded in 2004. It's something I was actually working at my first church after seminary. I had graduated seminary and was working full-time at a church in South Kansas City, and I was the youth minister and the discipleship minister. And we had a couple in the church from Africa. They had both grew up in Africa, but they had moved here and basically was living here permanently, but they still had family back in Africa. And they came to the pastor and they said, hey, our family back home would like to have a mission trip, wondering if the church would like to bring a group of folks from church to do a mission trip here in Africa. And the pastor's like, well, yeah, I'm okay with that. That sounds good. And he's like, he had gotten to know me a bit by that point. And he's like, hey, I know Chad really loves Africa. He loves animals. Cheetahs are my favorite animal. If you get to know me, you'll know that pretty quickly. And I always dreamed about going to Africa sometime. And so he's like, yeah, why don't you go talk to Chad? He can lead it, if it's something that we can work out. So they came to me, and the couple did, and they told me, hey, we want to do a mission trip. And I said, that sounds wonderful. Anyway, and so the mission trip was, we were going to go to Kenya, which right there is the continent of Africa that you see. And Kenya is on the east side. It's East Africa. It's got some space on the Indian Ocean. And so that's where Kenya is. And So before we did the mission trip, I just finished seminary, had been, reading books about missions and how missions, kind of the idea of white saviors kind of going colonialism and all of these bad things that we saw from some of the, mission efforts from the past. And so I said, yeah, let's do a mission trip, but we really need to find out what the needs are. A lot of times missions had been in the past had been, well, hey, we love doing XYZ, so we're going to go to Africa and do XYZ. Really, from what I had studied, I'd learned that, educating, or what I had learned is that, hey, we need to find out what their needs are and try to help them with their needs. Let them determine what they want us to do. And so we talked to the couple's mom and parents and family members and just trying to find out what their needs are. And we found out a couple needs. One was they had a clinic that was being built, but they didn't get the electricity put in. So they just needed so much money to put in a power pole. They shared some other needs that we could do. But one thing that they mentioned was one of the Kenyan lady's mom was back in Africa, and she'd helped start a school, but she said, hey, there's a lot of girls in our school that can't afford to go because they have all these school fees. They have to buy uniforms, they have to buy books, they have to do all of this stuff, and they just can't afford to pay those. And so they either can't go to school or they end up going to school and getting kicked out because they can't pay their school fees. And the thing is that education there was like the girls would go to school for a while and then they couldn't afford it. Then they'd get sent home and they'd be home working, or they'd sell a cow or try to do whatever they can to scrounge up money. And then maybe a year would pass and they would go back. And sometimes girls would be graduating high school at age 25 there because it just was so hard for them to have a consistent income. And so we're like, well, that sounds good, and we found out what the cost was, and we thought, well, that might be something we can do. Well, I thought that, and so we're like, well, let's see if we can put together, some girls to be sponsored. And so this is one of the first girls. This is a girl that was on our list on that first class that we sponsored back in 2004 and 5. And as you see, her name's Jacqueline Ndunji. She's in Form 2 here, which Form 2, they have Form 1 is 9th grade, Form 2 is 10th grade, Form 3 is 11th, and Form 4 is 12th grade. And so she was a sophomore. Anyway, her dad is deceased, her mom's deceased, and if you read the bio, there's not a lot. The girl is a total orphan. She is under the care of relatives who are not economically stable. She is in Form 2. She has gone a long way due to problems. She is in and out of school due to lack of fees. Her parents died of HIV/AIDS. And so I learned, about Jacqueline. And Jacqueline was a student that my wife and I ended up sponsoring. And so we really got to know her because we ended up going on the mission trip. We met her that first year. She was a really shy girl. But her dad and mom both had jobs. When she was younger, her dad was a truck driver, and her mom had kind of a store, if you will, a little kiosk type thing where they sold clothes and that sort of thing. And they had for Kenya, that's a pretty good life. But then her dad ended up getting HIV/AIDS, and he died. And then before he died, though, her mom contracted AIDS from her dad, and then her mom ended up dying as well. And so, as you can imagine, Jacqueline's life changed dramatically. Well, thankfully, she had an aunt and uncle that she could move in with. And her aunt and uncle both had jobs too. So she went, obviously she's under a lot of stress and grief from losing her parents, but at least she has a safe place to live. She can still go to school. Well, unfortunately, her uncle ended up getting AIDS too. And we could have a whole other presentation on HIV/AIDS in Africa, and how in Africa at that time, the most likely person to get AIDS in Africa was a married woman who was monogamous to her husband. And so, you can imagine, that sounds odd, but we'll just leave it at that. So her uncle got AIDS, and then he died. Thankfully, her aunt didn't get AIDS, And her aunt said, "Hey, Jacqueline, you can stay. You can still live with me." But her aunt had kids of her own. She's like, "But I can't afford to pay you for your school. So I have my other kids, and she's lost her husband now, and so she's having to work." And so Jacqueline was really in a tough spot. And that's when kind of she was struggling. And so we started sponsoring her, paying for her school fees. And this is my wife and I back in 2005 is the summer that we went. And there's Jacqueline sitting there in front of her school, smiling, and really just a sweet girl. And so we came home and we continued to receive letters from her. We continued to help educate her. And here's a quote that she put in a letter to me one time. She said, "Let me confess that I feel honored to be a part of your life because since we met, my life has changed completely. I'm happy to know that somebody somewhere cares." And when I saw that quote, I'm like, wow, I was really at a point in my life where I wanted to do something significant with my life as a minister. And when I read that, I'm like, I think that's significant. And it really didn't cost us that much. We paid a monthly fee to help educate Jacqueline. And for her, she finally had somebody who she felt cared for her, and her life changed. And so we went back. We continued that sponsorship program at the church in 2005, 6, 7, 8. 2009, we're like, hey, let's go back to Africa. Let's go back to Kenya and kind of continue our ministry. We had continued educating girls, but we wanted to stay connected in person with our folks there. And so Jacqueline had graduated then, and here's Jacqueline, a picture of her after she had graduated high school. Much different looking young woman, in my opinion. I mean, she was smiling the first picture, but she was so happy. She had gotten her high school education, and she actually went with us on our mission trip. She was one of our helpers there, and she went with us for the whole time we were there and was just wonderful. This is another bio from that first class. This is a girl named Nuru Suddy, and her dad died of AIDS. He suffered for a long time. They sold all they had, including part of their land, for his treatment. The mother is aged, and as a housewife can hardly do anything for pay. So the mom wasn't educated. While joining Form 1 her freshman year, they raised money to help Nuru go to school. Now she is among the top 10 girls in her class and the Girl Guide leader in our school. She is well behaved. They can hardly meet their basic needs. Please assist her. And Nuru, also her dad was of a different faith tradition, and he had multiple wives. And when Nuru's mom died, he just kind of focused on the rest of the family, and Nuru kind of was forgotten about because, I mean, if you read the Bible where there's multiple wives, often the moms are the ones who are advocating for their kids. And so when Nuru's mom died, she really didn't have an adult advocating for her, even with her own dad. And so he just focused on, helping the kids that had a mom advocating for them. So anyway, so that's Nuru. Bright girl though. She was top 10 of her class at Moy Girls School is where she was going. And so one of our church members at the time sponsored Nuru. It was funny. Nuru was, I can't remember. I think an older lady in her 80s sponsored Nuru. And so Nuru would refer to her as her grandma. But anyway, when we went back in 2009, Nuru also joined us on our mission trip. And here's Nuru back in 2009. And she traveled with us, and she worked with the current sponsored students, and just really a sweet girl. Nuru means bright, light. And Nuru definitely has a light about her that really is just a wonderful lady. And she actually went on to, her sponsor decided that they wanted to help her to get a college education too. Nuru did so well in school that she was able to get a spot at a national university. And her sponsor helped pay for her college education. Nuru went into education. She became a teacher, and she ended up, getting married, having kids, the whole 9 yards. And here's a picture of Nuru recently. with her 3 kids. She's standing in front of her car there, which is like, for Kenya, that's really unheard of, that somebody would have a vehicle. But Nuru, worked hard in school, got a education degree, became a school teacher, and really did well for herself. But, that was all, if you go back in times, if she would not have been sponsored back in 2005, who knows where she would have been today. She may have hopefully been able to graduate, but it would have been a much more challenging process for her. And so this is a picture of that first class in 2005. All the girls that were sponsored in that one year. And this was by a tiny little church. This church membership, well, not even membership, Sunday morning attendance probably was 130 people. And we sponsored 75 girls at 1 year from that little church. And so it really shows that a small group of people can make a difference. And so here's a picture of me and my wife. We were at the Moy Girls School, and the girls were so kind and hospitable. They just loved us. Here's one of our sponsors. This is Betty Jo and her girl that she sponsored back in the first class back in 2005. Betty Jo was, in her 80s as well, and she wanted to go on the mission trip, and which was wonderful. And so here's kind of where we are now. So to educate a girl there, it costs $40 a month or $480 a year total. And what that does is it provides a student with tuition for 1 year of secondary education. It provides a student with a safe place to live because in Africa, it's a former British colony, and they like the British system. And so they go to a boarding school. And so they go there and they live there and they live in a dorm, and then they go to breakfast and lunch and dinner, and then they go to classes and do student activities. So it gives them a safe place to live. It also provides a student with warm meals each day at school. It also provides a student with nurturing environment because the teachers are there constantly, kind of watching out for them, encouraging them, motivating them, that sort of thing. And it also provides a student with hope. And so that's what educating a girl does. It provides all those sorts of things. But wait, there's more. That's not all. You'll also combat climate change and make a greener world by educating a girl. And so some of the things we're hoping to do, we've been doing this program, like after I left that church and moved to my next church position, I introduced them to it, and that church, got involved, and then my next church got involved, and my next church got involved, and currently I'm not working in a church. And so Sustainable Sanctuary is one of the ministries that I do. And so when, we talked about this as a board, even before Drawdown, I said, hey, I've got this connection with educating girls in Africa. I'm wondering if this is something we can do. And then when Drawdown came out and it got a lot of attention and a lot of traction with folks associated with Sustainable Sanctuary, I thought, well, maybe this will be kind of it's not just Chad saying, hey, let's do this, but this all these educated, versed folks are saying educating girls is a way to help curb climate change. And so we've decided as Sustainable Sanctuary, the board voted to do this, to help facilitate educating girls. For your $40 a month, you see what happens. But we do have some hopes to do more than just that. We also want to do some student-led projects if we can do that. And so the idea here is that the students would either create an environmental club at their school, or if they already have an environmental club, they would be a participant in it. And then they would do some type of green project in their community there in Kenya. So it could be all kinds of different things. Once again, we would want the students to determine what the need is, and then they would do it. We did some of this just on our own. So this here there's Nuru, she's helping. One of the projects we did back in 2005 was we helped plant a shamba. And shamba is a Swahili word for garden. And so we, as a team, raised money to help buy irrigation hoses and seeds and all sorts of things to help plant a garden there. And that's Nuru. Actually, this is in 2009. That's Nuru is helping work in the Shamba that we helped sponsor. Our original school was Moi Girls School, which is halfway between Nairobi and Mombasa, which is down on the Indian Ocean. But we have a school closer to Nairobi because it's just had easier access. And our new school is Kilingala Secondary School. You see some of the girls that attend that school there. You see their building. They have a pretty nice building there. And it's just outside of Nairobi, maybe an hour outside of Nairobi. And here I've got some maps here for you. So if you look, so here's Nairobi. Here's Mombasa. The original school, Moi Girls School, where we sponsored girls for years, was right around this region here. It's near Tsavo National Park. So if you've ever seen the movie Ghost in the Darkness, it's about a train being put in and lions attacking the train workers. That was in Tsavo National Park back in the 1800s, and that's in this area. And so that's where Moi Girls School was. But if you look, here's Nairobi, here's Kilingala. So it's real close to Nairobi. So so that our local staff, which we have a local staff member who lives in Kenya. She's grown up there. She's worked with orphan girls and kids her whole career. Her name is Stella Mweu. And so it's not just us, just sending money there. Stella's there. She checks in on the girls. She makes sure the school fees are paid, that the girls are in school if they have other needs. And so she's our staff member there. Here's a picture of Stella with two girls at Kilingala School. Here she is back at Moi Girls School, and I know it's Moi Girls because Moi Girls had the burgundy sweaters and Kilingala has dark green sweaters. Here's Stella back with some students from a previous class that we sponsored. Here she is back at Kilingala with some of the potential students that could be. These are girls who need to be sponsored, and so there we go. And so don't wait to do more, change the world today. And I would encourage you to sponsor a student. And I've shared this before with Jerry and with other folks. There's a lot of sponsorship programs out there. There's World Vision. There's Compassion International. There's Unbound, which is a local Catholic charity, used to be called CFCA, but they changed their name to Unbound. They do sponsorship for kids. I mean, all of those are good. So if you're already sponsoring a kid through one of those, or maybe there's a Presbyterian sponsorship program, that is wonderful. I would encourage you to broadcast that to your friends and family, how you're sponsoring a kid and how you're helping with their education, but also helping with climate change. And I would encourage you to advocate to get your friends and family to try to start sponsoring girls in other parts of the world. And so here's a little quote that I hinted to earlier. And this is a Margaret Mead quote that I think is really powerful. It says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And so you may say, what is my sponsoring a girl? That will help her, but is that going to make a huge difference? And I would say, yeah, because it helps. Just in the fact and the exponential impact that it has on that girl and her community. But also, if you talk about what you're doing and talk with passion about what you're doing, then other people will get involved.